Oh, hi. Thanks for joining me for story time tonight. The year was 1997, and I was living the dream, working in a morning radio, partying like crazy. And that's what I was doing at this time. I was at somebody's house. It was the perfect kegger, where you don't even know whose house it is, you're just there. And I walk in, I'm looking for a bathroom. I'm just walking around the house, and I see in the kitchen there's this pan of brownies. And I'm like, well, I'll just have a little bit, because that's what you do with brownies. You little bit your way to a whole lot. And so every time I'd walk to the house, I'd have a little more brownie. And then something weird happened. This dog, with whom I'd had a great rapport, and everybody at the party was like, that dog doesn't like anybody but likes you. And I was like, of course, I know dogs. Well, suddenly our relationship turned sour, and that dog was afraid of me, and I was afraid of that dog. It was a mutual fear that just kept ascending, like growing, tumoring outward. And I got so scared of that dog that I just ran through the crowd of people and flipped over their fence into the alley and ran all the way to my then girlfriend, now wife's house. She would later find me, and would be crying on her front porch because I'd made a diagnosis. I had waterbrain. I don't even know what that meant. I just heard it somewhere in my youth, and I had waterbrain, and it was because I finally drank too much beer, and it was on my brain, literally, and I would never be the same again. So she could be with me if she wanted to, but it was going to be a chore because I had this new thing. And she was like, "Okay," and she just went to bed, and I had to go to work. Now, my work was an hour away, and it was about midnight, but it would take me that entire 5 hours that I needed to get there at 5 a.m. to actually get there, because the headlights on oncoming cars were terrifying. I would pull into the bar ditch and actually crawl to the floorboards of the vehicle and then emerge like frightened groundhog to see how much more drive I had left. I would actually stop at a convenience store and just examine myself on the reflective surface of their sunglass display to see if I was still me. I would buy a lot of hot dogs and then get back on the road the whole way, doing the same thing over and over, pulling into the bar ditch, hiding, getting back out. I'd get to the radio station and I'd actually go on the air. And I remember talking about my hands. I just started talking about my hands and how great they were and how it was amazing we had these hands, and I'll never take them for granted. And I remember my morning show partner was like, okay, what about the weather? And my boss came into the studio. I was like, maybe you need a nap. And I was like, sure, I'm down for that. So I fell asleep, and it was a wonderful nap, but I woke up, and I thought this little crease between my incredible bicep and forearm was a seashell. So I was just like, what the fuck? How did that happen? And I was like, I gotta go home. And I went home to Durango, and it took a long time. And I went to this diner that I loved, and I was devouring food and drinking sodas, trying to come out of my stupor, wash away the water brain. And this cute, like, hippie chick taps on the glass. And I look at her, and she looks at me, and I'm like, and she comes scurrying in. I'm like, oh, the radio fame is paying off. And she's like, oh my God, it's you. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, you're the guy that was at my house the other night. I was like, oh yeah. She's like, we thought you might have died. And I was like, why? She goes, you ate like the most potent marijuana brownies we've ever made. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. She's like, no, 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 we're just so happy you're alive. And I'm like, I don't have water brain. And she's like, what? I'm like, no, I'm happy I'm alive too.